Okay, so what I want to do today is I want to have a discussion with you guys to find out where you're at on a lot of this stuff. This isn't a test. Well, what this is a discussion so I can understand where you all are. I want to figure out, what the best way is of making sure that I'm of maximum assistance to you in the rest of the course to help you guys get to where I think it's going to be important for you to get in this class. What I want to start out by reading an article that was put in the New York Times yesterday evening, put on their website. And this is James Comey. This is the former FBI director. Now, remember, he was the FBI director not only for Trump, but he was the FBI director for George W. Bush. Come up here, please. Great. Great. And here's what he said about the issue, one of the issues that we're dealing with. Okay, you may not have heard this yet. Here he says, look, people have been asking me, this is James Comey, the FBI director, people have been asking me hard questions. What happened to the leaders in the Trump administration, especially the Attorney General, Bill Barr, who I have said was due the benefit of the doubt? How could William Barr, a bright and accomplished lawyer, start channeling President Trump in using words like collusion, no collusion, and FBI spying, and downplaying acts of clear obstruction of justice as products of the president being simply frustrated and angry, something he would never say to justify the thousands of crimes prosecuted every day that are the obvious product of frustration and anger? How could he write and say things about the report by Robert Mueller, the special counsel, that were so apparently misleading that they prompted a written protest from the special counsel himself? How could William Barr go before the Senate Judiciary Committee on Wednesday and downplay President Trump's obvious attempt to fire Mr. Mueller before he had completed his work? And how could Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, after the release of Mr. Mueller's report that detailed Mr. Trump's determined efforts to obstruct justice, give a speech quoting the president on the importance of the rule of law, or upon his resigning, thank the president who had relentlessly attacked both him and the Department of Justice that he led for the courtesy and humor that he often displays in our personal conversations? Whatever happened to these people? People are complicated, so the answer is most likely complicated as well. But I have some idea from my 4 months of working so closely with Mr. Trump and my many more months of watching him shape others. Amoral leaders have a way of revealing the character of those around them. Sometimes what they reveal is inspiring. For example, James Mattis, the former Secretary of Defense, he resigned over principle, a concept so alien to Donald Trump that it took Trump days to realize what had actually happened before he could start lying about the man. But more often, proximity to an amoral leader reveals something depressing. I think that's at least part of what we're seeing with Bill Barr and Rod Rosenstein. Accomplished people lacking inner moral strength cannot resist the compromises necessary to survive Donald Trump, and that adds up to something that they will never recover from. It takes character like Mr. Mattis to avoid this damage, because Donald Trump eats your soul one small bite at a time. It starts with you sitting silent while he lies, both in public and even in private, making you complicit by your silence. In meeting with him, his assertions about what, quote, everybody thinks, or, quote, what is obviously true, wash over you unchallenged. as they did at our private dinner on January 27th of 2017, because after all, he's the President of the United States, and he rarely stops talking. As a result, Donald Trump pulls all of those present into his circle of silent assent. Speaking rapid fire, with no spot for others to jump into the conversation, Donald Trump makes everyone a co-conspirator to his preferred set of facts or delusions. I have felt it, this president building with his words a web of alternative reality and busily wrapping around everyone else in the room. I must have agreed that he had the largest inauguration crowd in history because I sat silent and didn't challenge that. Everyone must agree that he has been treated unfairly, and so the web building never stops. From the private circle of assent, it moves to public displays of personal fealty in places like public cabinet meetings. While the entire world is watching, you do what everyone else does around the table. You talk about how amazing the leader is and what an honor it is to even be associated with him. Sure, you notice that Mr. Mattis is sitting silently, never actually praising the president, always speaking instead of the honor of representing the men and women in uniform. But he's a special case, right? He's a former Marine general, after all. No way that the rest of us could possibly get away with that. So you praise, and the world watches, and the web gets tighter. Next comes Donald Trump attacking our very institutions and the most basic values that we all hold dear, things you have always said must be protected, and which you criticize past leaders for not supporting strongly enough. Yet you are silent, because after all, what are you supposed to say? He's the President of the United States. You can feel this happening. It bothers you, but his outrageous conduct convinces you that you simply have to stay on to preserve and protect the people and the very institutions and values that you hold dear. Along with the Republican members of Congress, you tell yourself that you are just simply too important for this nation to lose, especially now. But you can't say this out loud. You can't even say this to your own family. But in a time of emergency, when the nation is being led by a deeply immoral person, this will be your contribution, your personal sacrifice for America. You are smarter than Donald Trump, and you are playing the long game for your country, so you can pull it off where lesser leaders might fail and have gotten fired by a tweet. Of course you'll stay. You must be seen as part of the team. So you make further compromises. You begin to use his language. You publicly praise his leadership, and you tout even his commitment to values. And then you are lost, for he has eaten your entire soul. Okay, this is the FBI director in the New York Times, published last night. Okay? So, the question that I want to talk with you about today, is this only about a single rotten apple in the barrel? Is this just about one simple immoral man who happens to be the accidental president, who just happens to have gotten the nomination for one of the only two major parties, because the Republican Party, realizing that Hillary Clinton was almost certainly going to be the Democratic Party nominee, selected very quickly by the Democratic primary process, and they wanted to accelerate the selection of their candidate. And so what they did, as I mentioned, they changed the rules for the primaries, in that any given individual who got more votes than anybody else in a primary race, even if there's a dozen people running, gets all the delegates. And that just started stacking up, even though Trump himself would only get 15, 16, 18% of the actual votes that were cast. And the others divided up, the 10%, 12%, 11%, 8%. And so that, well, when the overwhelming majority, like 80 to 85% of all of the people in the primary didn't want him to be the nominee, the Republican Party gave him all of the delegates in that state. And so is that what we're looking at here? Are we looking at an accidental president that is the product of simply a short-sighted, bureaucratic, self-serving decision made by one of the two major political parties? In that we're all faced with people around him just trying to protect America, trying to protect the basic values that we have. Or is there something else going on? Is there something deep in the soul of an element in our country that has been consistently driven by greed and immoral motives and engaged in conduct that, I just want to close with this to start the conversation. I was just driving back here. I've been up at Santa Clara University today. We're meeting with the representatives of all 26 Jesuit colleges to try to get their students to become interns to work on global climate change and stuff. And I was driving back, and a National Public Radio, now this is New York Times here, National Public Radio here, interviewing a reporter from the New Yorker. He has been interviewing people about Bolton, okay? And Bolton has now been selected by Trump to be the national security advisor for him. And this fellow told the story about Bolton going to in the Middle East, in Iraq, and wanting to get. And here they are all moaning and groaning about the Russians interfering in our election, right? And what's happening here is that they tell the story about Bolton going to Iraq, wanting the president of Iraq to resign. And the president had become determined that there were no weapons of, this wasn't in Iraq, it was another country, but that Saddam Hussein did not have weapons of mass destruction. He did not have chemical weapons, and he did not have weapons of mass destruction, and he was ready to try to get a peaceful resolution to stop the W. Bush administration from invading the Middle Eastern oil fields. And so Bolton went into a meeting with this president of this other country and told him that he wanted him to resign because he didn't want him taking that position. And the person refused, and Bolton told him that he knew where his wife lived, and he knew where his children went to school, and he had better resign. Okay? And so this is what we have in the leadership of the United States government right now. Okay? So there's at least two bad apples. Okay, and so what I would like to start talking with you about now, I want to, and if compelled to do so, I'll start calling on you. Okay, so I want you just to lean forward a little bit. There's no such thing as a wrong answer here, but I'm trying to figure out what you guys in your generation actually feel about what is going on now. And how much attention do you actually get to spend following this? I mean, is it just this class where you listen to this stuff and the homework that you do here? Or do you get to, do you watch the news? Do you watch MSNBC or CNN? Or do you watch NBC or CBS or ABC? Tell me, what you think is happening based on what your attention is been devoted to this already. So start talking about it. What do you think is going on right now in the country, and how historic do you think it is?
I think it's very historic because we never had such a president that made these controversial statements, such as declining climate change and such. And I think it's historic just because this is a problem that we're all trying to face and something that we're all trying to combat.
Mm-hmm. So you think that it's because we've never had a president who says things like this. That's the kind of defining problem.
Yeah,
that we have.
the facts like climate change. That's the main issue, I think, and not necessarily. That's the specific issue I want to say.
That one, it's the global climate change thing. His denial of it makes it critical. Yes.
I guess I would say that as information becomes more available to the everyday person, it's more of people are able to challenge what he says now, whereas a long time ago, if the president said something, you're more likely to just go with it again because, well, he said in that, he's the president. Whereas people now, with the internet and everything, you can challenge things very easily, and so I think that's kind of where that comes from.
And do you think that that's what's causing National Public Radio and the New York Times and others to say things, take positions that you would never have assumed they'd ever take against the president because they know they have to, because there's all kinds of other information flying around on the internet and stuff that they have to take into account?
I don't know if I would say they would have to, but I would say that it definitely plays a role.
Okay, so
I think what everyone's talking to ties to what a scholarly source is, right, and also to the scientific literacy and the legitimacy of a source. Systematically, what you're saying is that a president has never directly, verbatim mentioned climate change and said, you know what, it's not real, right? Word for word, yeah, to a degree though, because systematically we see presidents over a period of time blame other countries for either not being civilized or not being modern, and us having to instill democracy within themselves because they don't uproot or utilize all their oil, right? And we talked in class, a lot of big oil companies and businesses know what climate change, know that it's been happening, and historically they've seen it, especially since I want to say post-depression era. It's people started to notice a change, but no one really wanted to talk about it. No one wanted to create the discussion. And then with the internet, you're right also to a degree because it also creates this echo chamber. But social media does is utilize algorithms. And with algorithms, whatever you like just starts being showed over and over and over. So you start thinking, you know what, this is what I want to see and use, but it's not what I see day to day. And you're asking us what do we listen to? What do we watch? I wake up every morning and listen to about 7 to 8 podcasts a day. Right? Democracy Now!, NPR, BBC Radio, Louise, Vox. I can tell you about everything that I listen to, but I try to stay informed on this because, my housemates, let's say, they're all my age, right? They're all 20, 21, 22. None of them even knew what Barr's testimony in front of the Senate was. None of them. I was watching it for hours in front of them, and they were all busy watching Game of Thrones. So, social media in general, and entertainment, as well as this new generation, is what creates this sort of echo chamber because we have so many sources, but because we can be so ill-minded and not want to utilize these sources, we become stuck and entrenched in this echo chamber of what we like, what we see. So historically, some people may have not said it word for word, but systematically we've created this system of corporatocracy and capitalism that has slowly started to erode the minds of many and misconstrue what fact is and start to tell us what fiction is.
Well, I do see the points you were making about some people deciding, or not deciding, but making not the conscious effort to look online and do the research and everything. You have to give people the benefit of the doubt that their lives might be so up that I'm sorry.
No, we're real friends.
Okay. But some people they need their escapes, they need their Game of Thrones, they need their social media not filled up with another black body on the street, another political attack on their living, on their lives. Some people need these escapes, and even though people should be informed and stay informed, also it's about not like making it seem that, oh, I'm better because I care, or like you're not as good because you're not staying up to date 24/7. Like some people just like can't take that. Like you have to take care of yourself and then like I guess put it in a format that's accessible to everyone, because not everyone can listen to podcasts every day. Not everyone can like have access to the TV or internet in a format where they can like use it to like use all the benefits. So it's about like taking your knowledge and spreading it amongst your roommates, and not being like, why didn't you watch? Being like,
Well, come on, we'll get back, but let me, I was with one of the people on the Board of Supervisors yesterday, and he was riding with Joe Biden to a political meeting up in Pennsylvania a while ago. And what Joe Biden said is that, look, the people that we're talking to here up in Pennsylvania, they don't care about whether or not their kids go to college and get free college, because they're planning on working in the mills if they can, or that they want them to they want their son or daughter to run their plumbing business or something. And this is what he's saying, and that they're not really engaged. That this event going on the television, on CNN and MSNBC and stuff, and the big battle going on between them and Fox News, that he's saying a lot of the people that's going on at a level that they aren't directly interested in, like because they apparently don't believe that global climate change is happening, or they don't think in a long-term enough way to make their daily plans or even their short-term plans based upon long-term events taking place. So this thing that you're talking about of people wanting to have a little bit of relief or wanting to watch entertainment, and they resent people suggesting that if they aren't paying attention to this, that somehow you're better than they are or something. I hear you. So you were going to say something else.
I wanted to right back at you. At the same time, you're assuming that I create this hierarchy within myself and then with my housemates, which I never do. I can understand from the context in which I'm stating that some people choose entertainment over fact, because I'm going to tie back to MLK and in Chaos or Community. It's one of his books. He talks about how you're a byproduct of your environment and how real estate is the true form of capitalism. It's like something that's tied to private property. And so being a byproduct of your environment, let's take me for example. I'm from a region in Southern California, like San Diego, but I'm from a really poor neighborhood. My parents are from a really poor indigenous area in Michoacan, New Mexico, right? So I've seen crime, I've seen murder, I've seen everything, but that's my environment. So I've had this culture, so then you know what? It's best for me to be in the know-how. It's best for me to recognize what's real and what isn't. But like you're saying, this also creates this sense of isolation because we vary on our parents. It depends on people around us to create this bubble or not to create a bubble. And we sort of choose media based on what we see in day-to-day life. So you're really right. Some people don't want to know what's going on, or they don't feel comfortable knowing because it can be really tense. It can be super graphic. It can be catastrophic and destroying someone's personality. And I've seen that happen. So take entertainment. Entertainment is a great way to relax, right? It's a great way to move away from the scary thing that is reality. And that's really true. And some people do need that and gravitate towards that. But at the same time, you have to realize that a person is a byproduct of their environment. Because they take day in and day out what they see, and they can reciprocate it, whether they know it or not. And at the same time, like I was saying, my housemates didn't know, but when one of them asked me what I was watching, I told them, this is who Turn Different Bar is, this is what's going on, and I'm also working on research for a book that I'm writing that's on implicit bias. I told them, look, I'm working on this, and it's going to surround around our generation. I'm trying to make it as interesting as possible for us. So I'm going to take a poll of a lot of people on this campus that may not be scientifically literate, because maybe they don't know they aren't. It's just what they've been accustomed to. It's just it's the byproduct of social media. Sometimes you can't help it, right? It's what we see day in, day out. Like what I said, it's best to educate.
All right, so look, let me ask you, what do you think? What do you think about the other kids? That you know and stuff. I mean, do they give a shit about the fact that everybody's talking about global climate change, or do they care about whether Trump gets impeached? What do you think most of the kids are thinking about right now?
I mean, I would agree. I would definitely admit to myself. I mean, I definitely care. I definitely give a crap about what's going on.
Yeah.
But I mean, apart from this class, I haven't really paid as much attention to it as I probably should be. And I think, speaking to what they're saying, I do like engage in a lot of entertainment as sort of a release. But I think definitely this class has inspired me to be more in touch with the news and another class I'm taking, which is U.S. and the global economy. But also not only myself, but to get my housemates involved as well.
All right. So what do you think? The kids that you talk to and you are with, what are they thinking about either global climate change or this impeachment stuff going on? What do they think?
Well, I'm actually a legal studies major, so I'm surrounded by people who are constantly talking about our government and just anything that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, even social media nowadays has news about what's going on. Like, our president is always on Twitter. So, you know, entertainment or not, you'll still find out what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So they know that it's happening, but now are any of you from the Midwest anywhere? From Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, or anywhere? Are you guys? How many of you are from California? Yeah, see, most of us are from California, because when we were doing the Standing Rock case and other things that we were doing up in the Dakotas, when you drive around and listen to the radio, in the car, driving around in the Dakotas or in the Midwest somewhere, or you go down into Iowa it's astonishing. They have this thing called Clear Channel or something, Clear Channel, I think, radio, and you go from one place on the dial to another, and it's these hardcore right-wing kind of crazies that are just weaving this complete alternative reality. Like when you go home tonight, you just turn on your computer, and all you have to do is Google Spygate, the Epoch Times, EPOCH, the Epoch Times, and there it'll be, okay? And what I want you to do is I want you to watch it, because what's getting ready to happen here is the Senate, under Lindsey Graham, has now specifically instructed the Attorney General, William Barr, the subject of this, among other people, to investigate the theory that this entire investigation by the special prosecutor is not only a hoax, but a plot. That it was a plot by a group inside the FBI and the intelligence community to basically oust Trump. And and they're going to push this narrative that the United States Senate, under the control of the Republican Party, is going to be holding hearings on this. They're going to be calling the witnesses they want to call on this. And they're going to start pushing the narrative that this whole thing, with regard to which there was no evidence to support the charge that the president and his campaign colluded with the Russians, that it was a big hoax, the whole thing, it was all fabricated, and not only was it a hoax, but it was a plot on the part of what they're referring to as the deep state. And what they're doing is they're attacking the national security state infrastructure in the country. Okay, and so I want you to do that. Okay, and it's important because in Barr's testimony yesterday, that they specifically asked him to investigate this, and he said, well, I'm already investigating it. I've already got several investigations going on about this. And then they said, are you also investigating people who might have leaked any information to the news media from inside the administration or inside the Justice Department or inside the FBI or inside the special prosecutor's staff? So that they're going on a hunt right now. And they're going to be doing that with the power of the Attorney General. And all the Democrats, the regular Democrats so far, are just saying, I think Barr ought to consider resigning. Like, leaving it up to him. At which point he'll say, piss off. I'm here, you're not. I'm the Attorney General, you're not. So unless they have the courage to impeach him, which they can, it's important for you to know, the House of Representatives, controlled by the Democratic Party, could impeach Barr because he's a political appointee that had to be approved by the Senate, and they can impeach him. But that could be a plan. That could be what Barr is intending, to get the House to spend their time impeaching him instead of impeaching Trump, and shoot all of their energy into that, and have him be the fall guy, that he'll take the spear, right, for the president. Okay, so you got to understand what's going on here. So I want you to watch that two-part special. Okay, consider it homework, and I want you to look at it. Okay, but without your having seen that yet, what?
Just wanted to bring up the point about the Spygate.
Yes.
I've kind of looked into it a little bit. I haven't watched the exact videos you're talking about right now, but they look kind of back into subversive behavior by our national security state in the first place. And it seems like they're kind of using the Bradley Manning and a lot of the whistleblowers to somehow show how the national security state is divisive in terms of, like I said, partisan ideals, that they're, left-leaning FBI and CIA agents that are...
Yeah, all of those. All the FBI, left-leaning FBI people. Yeah, right. They're everywhere.
What do you think is, I guess, like the best way to combat that, considering that they're using, actual, historic...
Well, let me state what I said before. When you watch that special, you're going to see approximately 400 factual assertions or data points that they're asserting, and like 350 of them are true. And not only that, but they show the videos of it being true behind them, very slick. Show you a video that, you look at the video and you go, oh yeah, I remember, that's what happened, and that they've choreographed this narrative in such a way that it becomes a viable thesis. Okay, and now that the United States Senate Republicans are onto it and getting ready to assert it, and now they have an attorney general who is willing to use the power of the Justice Department and the power of grand juries, which they've now commandeered. And so they're no longer a source of protection against the citizen, which they were designed to be. They're a weapon that's been seized by the prosecutors, the king's prosecutors, to basically compel people to come in and testify, or have the power to put them in prison if they won't testify. And so there's getting set to be a very dramatic series of events that are getting set to take place in this confrontation between the Republican-controlled Senate and the democratically controlled House right now. But overshadowing that entire thing is the fact that even if the House impeaches somebody, they have to put them on trial in the Senate. In the Senate, as Tip O'Neill told to me right at the very beginning of the Iran-Contra thing, as long as the Republicans control the Senate, they won't convict. They will not convict, a Republican person who has committed impeachable offenses. And so that what we're getting ready to look at is such a fundamental problem in our system. And what I want to again ask you is, do you think that this is the product of a single bad apple?
It's like the phrase "shit runs downhill." So at the top you got Trump spewing a bunch of, shit, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there is a better word. It has no synonyms, as Barr says. Yeah, right.
So, and then everything that he touches kind of is corruptible. I think kind of the Senate Judiciary Committee is a great example. Lindsey Graham has long, before the Trump era, was not known for being kind of the partisan hack, that he was. He was always kind of a John McCain-style centrist Republican, country over party. And you've seen, as this administration kind of devolves the national politics and, kind of the normal, you see, what was once kind of centrism just moving, and the divide moving. Because one guy in office is setting a terrible example, and his party is falling in line behind it. If he's okay to behave that way, then the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee can behave that way. Then the, Secretary of Education, the Secretary of all of these people, are empowered, not even in the government, but even out in the streets, you see it, people rises in Islamophobia and anti-Semitism because they feel empowered, The shit's running downhill, and it's affecting everybody. So it's not just one bad apple. At the top it's one huge apple, but he's infecting the rest of the tree.
Okay, so that's it. This sounds a lot like, what this sounds a lot like is that, World War II happened because of Hitler. And Hitler was a really charismatic speaker. He was had a lot of magnetism and a lot of charisma, and he basically talked everybody into it. And that they all started acting this way around him, but there are other countervailing theses that he in fact was a genius, Hitler, and that he was able to see the fissures in the culture, and that he was able to play upon racial biases, cultural and class-based animosities, etc. And he basically choreographed this event happening, but again, making him the proximate cause of the entire World War. And so that this is one of the questions that I want to kind of put to you is if in fact it's not that, if it's not just this one particular individual who has catalyzed this whole thing to happen this way, why is it that if in fact this element, ever since the founding of the Constitution in Hamilton, and the others, the robber barons, of the 1868 to 1898, all the big magnates, in Brown Brothers Harriman, if they've been around for all this time, 250 years, what it is, why is this happening now? Why is this happening now instead of happening at some other time?
Well, if I may respond, because those powers are always there. They're a constant, right? But historically, as we've talked about in this class, is they take advantage of kind of, while Trump is bad, he is the bad apple in the office, there's, people are inclined to take advantage of that and use it for their own ends. The powers that be, kind of these big players took advantage of the Richard Nixon administration. Iran-Contra, they took advantage of, kind of the moral turpitude of the Reagan administration to, sell off guns to people who weren't supposed to have them, in Central America. So it takes both kind of the bad apple and, kind of the powers behind it to take advantage of that.
Well, what do you think about this, whether Trump is causing this or he's a symptom of something that is sort of in the system or in the culture or in the economic system? What do you think?
I think Trump is, to say, he's kind of the heart of it. Like, he isn't just the entire kind of figure, but he's like a figurehead, I suppose. Like, I think to say that it's just him kind of puppeteering everything is kind of a bit much, and I think it's more than just him, and that there are kind of a lot of figures that are just kind of, I don't know, like working alongside him. And like he's just kind of amplifying a lot of the problems because he's so kind of open-headed and he's so quick to use kind of technology and the internet and Twitter to kind of say such kind of crude words that it's just kind of, like he said, like affecting a lot of the things. But like, I think there are bigger heads that are kind of helping him alongside, and he's just, you know, like a figurehead.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think that there are elements in the Republican Party, and potentially even some in the Democratic Party, that are inclined to leave him in there because of him giving them these great tax breaks and eliminating all of these regulatory rules to protect the environment and protect consumers and all of that against the big corporations? Do you think that there's some kind of a group of people that are actively and willfully keeping him in place despite all of these problems with him because of the benefits they're getting?
Yeah, I think like he acts as just kind of a wall. He's so loud that like there are a lot of kind of figures that can act behind him. So I think like keeping him in place benefits a lot of people.
I hear you. All right. What else? What are some other thoughts that people have without me having to put specific questions to you? What are you thinking about this stuff?
Well, I feel like Trump is just kind of like the same as normal with the uglier face and says meaner words, because when you look at like the principle of the opposition in the Republican Party, like people like John McCain and Jeff Flake, like these are senators who voted with Trump upwards of 90% of the time with everything he was trying to pass. And they didn't really have any problem with that. They didn't see, really it seems like the only thing most of the political establishment has a problem with is the decorum angle and the rudeness and the meanness, and he says bad words and is on Twitter too much. Like when you actually look at the policy, like I have a hard time distinguishing between like the actual administration of the Trump administration and like the Bush administration, for example, or any other kind of standard. Well, I guess with the exception of like some trade stuff, but like, I think it's fairly comparable to just kind of business as usual. But it's upset people in some unusual ways, and I was like provoked with backlash.
Personally, yes, John.
I just wanted to add to that. I don't know if any of you caught the headline a couple days ago, but a Twitter engineer, software engineer, whatever, went to the press saying that they couldn't deploy an algorithm that they would use to detect and ban white supremacists because it would affect too many GOP lawmakers. Mm-hmm. Like they were like, well, we can't do it because there's so many Republican, elected officials that tweet the same kind of things that we flag for white supremacists. So they can't ban white supremacists on Twitter because too many of them are Republicans.
Well, let me ask that one. I mean, in light of this thing about the technology and people sharing information on the internet and all that, and him twittering and all that, is that if in fact there were a way to censor white supremacists from communicating on the internet, if they could figure out some algorithm by means of which to do it, how many of you think that they should do that? And how many other things do you think they should censor in addition to the white supremacists?
Well, I think like
if they could figure it out.
Since it's a private company, like if they don't want like hate speech or discriminatory speech on the platform, that they should have the option to do so.
Okay, so hate speech, which is like, well, the white supremacy stuff isn't necessarily hate speech. I mean, you can be extolling the values of white Caucasian values, if you can think of them like that. And then the hate speech goes into turning on other people and denigrating them because of their race, their close. And And what was the other one?
I mean, like,
Oh, just racial, even if it isn't hate speech, if it's racial prejudice.
yeah, I don't know, like, I feel like it would have to be more like a judgment call, like, if you're, like, I wouldn't, like, deal in absolutes and just put on a blanket statement and be like, if any tweet, like, contains this word, like, it can't go on the platform, but more like, maybe like, they have people who sort of, like, moderate, and they use their own discretion to decide if they find something to be.
So then they need to be monitoring it pretty closely to be able to actually make subjective judgments about whether there's a whole pattern that goes along with just some of the bad words in here.
Yeah, I just feel like it's such a big company, like they kind of have that responsibility to the public to ensure that it's a productive space
All right.
for everybody.
That's interesting. Yeah, yes.
I think there's kind of two different questions going on here. One is whether or not it should, and then whether or not it would ever actually be able to happen. Because I think the whole free speech thing is so embedded into American culture that it would never, like, I feel like if any private company came out with, oh, that we're going to regulate this, like, a ton of people would just hate that just for the pure fact of, like, you're silencing, you know, whatever they're trying to silence.
Even if they should.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
I think that there would be so backlash to that because, you know, in places like Germany, you're not allowed to say things like the Holocaust didn't happen. So, like, you can't do that. Whereas, like, here, if you said that, like, I mean, nothing's really gonna happen to you except for, like.
But even though it should.
Right.
Okay, so you think it should?
I think it should, but I just don't see that as a foreseeable option here in the United States.
All right. So you think it's more of a practical problem?
Right.
Okay. And what other things do you think should be banned or stopped from being said on the internet?
Anything against, like he said, racial discrimination or things that people can't change, like their sexuality or their religion. I just don't think that should be allowed to be said, you know, or I don't know.
Mm-hmm. What about people who are atheists?
Yeah, okay. Okay, I think there's a difference between saying your opinion and directly harassing a group of people.
But because you think there are things that should be banned from being communicated. But you got two problems. One is a technical problem of really being able to, part of it is what Isaac was talking about, you'd have to listen an awful long time to figure out if they're really saying something that's hateful is distinct from their opinion. Okay, all right.
I kind of disagree. I feel like I'm a pretty big free speech fanatic. I definitely believe that if you're inciting violence, that's a serious issue, but I have a problem with trying to shut up, you know, I guess, the consciousness of our population. I feel like doing that is dangerous. Because for me personally, I gotta know if you're racist. I want, like, you know, be openly racist, so now I know who you are. Versus, not everybody has to be scared of this potentially way more racist other kind of networks. I don't know what I mean? So,
Okay, so
it's not trying to be fearful.
it's the instigating violence that you're concerned about. Okay, that's what Chase Iron Eyes was charged with at Standing Rock, was inciting violence. And violence was identified in the case as whatever amount of force might qualify for domestic violence.
You said you want to kill people. I think that maybe shouldn't be getting a large amount of people to get pitchforks and try to kill your neighbor. I think that probably should be policed. But in terms of someone saying, I hate my neighbor because of this, you know, at least the population, hopefully the population is on a higher level.
What about going out and chaining yourself to all the bulldozers that they're bringing in to dig a pipeline right through your main water supply?
Aren't you harming yourself with that versus harming equipment?
So you're making a distinction between anti-materiel violence and anti-personnel violence.
100%.
Well, there you go. That one's up on the table now. Okay, okay, yes.
Back to your thing with the GOPs, I would rather them say it just so you know what they believe in, because that's their only outlet of information to us, of their personal information, is how the way they present themselves online.
So if you don't have that, then you kind of might vote for them, not knowing that they held this type of view.
Yeah?
So I feel like that's beneficial.
What if they, would you stop them though if they started advocating ad hominem violence?
But that's already being like pinged.
Pardon?
Like the NSA, right? Like they can like just, those are already key words right now. If you ever say like homicide, violence, like those are already what the NSA is pinging for. So that's already like an option on the table. Like if you ever say like something super violent, they have a list of words that they ping you for in the NSA, and that's probably.
But I mean, do you think that's okay?
Yeah.
You think?
Violent, then yeah.
Okay. So you think that's okay? All right. So yes.
I think that they shouldn't censor these kind of things because I agree with what she was saying. Like, I think that before Trump was elected, like there were so many racist people who never spoke up. So we lived in a society where we believed that racism didn't exist anymore. But now after his election, we have realized that racism has never ended in this country and the truth of what's going on.
So you think it's a good thing? Because he's exposed them now. He's gotten them all exposing themselves. And what about exposing themselves on their, what do you call that? The Skype, the visible things. What about exposing themselves on Skype? You know, physically. They ought to stop that too. Any kind of physical exposure of themselves because it's one of the issues that they're using to try to develop rules to censor the internet, of saying that that people are engaging in sexual activity with each other. You know, it's a modern version of, I guess, phone sex. You think they ought to shut that off too? Yeah, since you started the list of things.
I do think it's like good to leave some discretion open for a private company to sort of moderate the discussions, because like, what if the CEO of Twitter was like Jewish or something, and there's like a giant group of like this giant Holocaust group on Twitter just like spewing all this like Holocaust denial stuff.
Yeah.
And like, you're Congress and he goes to you, or let's say he like bans them and says they can't talk on Twitter and tweet all this stuff, and Congress is like, no, like you have to like let them do. Like how do you reconcile like a situation like that? Which is like why I say it's kind of like dangerous to work in absolutes, because like it can always switch and sort of work against you.
So let me ask you this. We don't get too far afield here, but what is it you think is actually wrong with someone denying the Holocaust?
I just don't think it adds anything like valuable. Like it's not valuable speech.
So unless you're saying something valuable, whatever it is you're saying, that they can censor. Something that's constructive, that helps, so that the purpose of the First Amendment is to protect speech that is constructive, that's helping people make decisions about governing and public policy issues and things like that. And as long as you're doing that, then your speech is protected?
I think so. And like, especially with something like Holocaust denial, unless somebody has a great argument as to why like it would be productive to deny something like that. I don't know.
So, okay, so it's not productive. So in fact, anything that's not true is not productive. Isn't that right?
Not just not true, but also that is maybe so like powerful like that and affects such a large amount of people and their history.
I mean, it offends them.
Yeah.
So if somebody says something that's untrue, and it really offends a large enough number of people, that they ought to be not allowed to put that on the internet.
If those conditions are met, then I think that the people who run Twitter should have the discretion to moderate it and to remove it.
All right. Now, given the fact that the internet has become virtually like a telephone used to be, Do you think that back in the age when people were on the telephones, that somebody ought to be listening to people on the telephone, and if they're saying something that is untrue or unconstructive, that the private telephone company ought to have shut off their phone?
But I feel like that's different because that's a private conversation, whereas like your Twitter is public.
Only if people tune into it, though, right? I mean, you're not forcing yourself into somebody else's space, are you?
Right.
So what we're seeing is you can see that Trump and Trumpism is stirring up an awful lot of things in the culture right now. And as you were saying, I'm sorry, I forgot your name again? Jessica. And as you were saying, that maybe this is a good thing, that there's some positive things about having Trump be president even for 4 years, and because he's exposing people, he's stimulating latent problems in the culture and exposing them. He's getting people to think about things like shouldn't somebody be censored on the internet, and even to the point of thinking about whether or not things ought to be allowed to be shut off on the internet because they're not true. There's nothing constructive about saying things that aren't true, and therefore there's going to have to be some discretion exercised on the part of the owners of the company to say, well, I don't think that's true. Or worse yet, even if it is true, I don't like it, and it's not constructive. And so that what's happening here is that with Donald Trump, you're having this huge stimulation into the culture of lots of things that have been kind of left unsaid or are latent or are what they refer to as inchoate. They're just kind of there in potential. And what he's doing is he's stimulating these things. Now, isn't that in fact what the accusations are, is what Russia was doing. That Russia was doing the same thing. That Russia was, sending out tweets that were by false people, and they were exacerbating racist divisions, class divisions. They were looking for these fissures in the society